Hey, welcome to the channel, guys. We're making a grain walnut cutting board for some family members down south that I went to see a couple weeks ago. Milled down a really old hunk of walnut here and cut it into strips and did a glue up. Then I just smoothed it out because I will be cutting it again. And you can see here we put it on the crosscut sled on the table saw and then flipped it up so we had the end grain. The plan was to do a maple inlay with their initial here on the front and a juice groove, and of course my brand on the back. So I glued up a small maple chunk and put that on the crosscut sled as well, and made a little tiny end grain maple for the plug. For stuff like this, I put it on the CNC to flatten it out. I use this double-sided tape. This method here works pretty good. This is a new channel, so if you're liking what you're seeing, go ahead and give me a like and subscribe. Hit that bell. So I'm just Z'ing out the CNC machine here. This is a Open Builds 1515 lead machine. I've had it for almost a year and honestly still learning new stuff every day. So I'm just running a flattening job here, and I'm super conservative, so I take about 20 thousandths off per pass, just until I've got the surface of the board nice and smooth. This has been trimmed, but I will admit, and you're going to find out here in just a bit, I'm using a really cheap router bit, and I wish I hadn't, but lessons were learned. So I flattened this until I got it nice and smooth. I was struggling with feeds and speeds. You can see here it scorched the board. I could not get it to not scorch my board. I knew this would come out in sanding. It looks super terrible right there, but it's actually pretty smooth. I'm gonna go ahead and blame this on the bit at this point, and you will see why here in just a few. So I cut the female part of the B here, and then I did the reverse for the plug on this end grain maple chunk I made. And everything turned out really nice. It fit perfectly. I'm using the Vectric software for the CNC, and I've got some settings. If anybody's interested, I'll be glad to share them to make these inlays. This thing, the plug fit in there just perfectly. So I glued that up and clamped it up for a day or so, and I started hogging off the material. Now I made that plug pretty thick there just because being end grain and using the machine, I wanted it to be nice and sturdy. I hated wasting that much wood. I think that maple was ripped it down into 1x1 squares for the plug. And so I was just hogging material off here, and you'll see I got it down to here. Everything's working perfectly. I'm finally getting that last layer of the plug off, and I'm left with the B, and it fit perfect. It was in there great. The plan was to go ahead and swap in my surfacing bit and bring this down to the level of the board for one final surface when disaster struck. So a huge chunk of that B broke out on the surfacing bit and bent the bit, broke the B, and I got a huge gouge in the board, and it was a mess. And I was just about out of time, so before the trip down south, so we went with epoxy for the inlay. I really wanted to save the board because I put a bunch of time and work into it, so I did end up servicing this after the epoxy was set up, and then we began sanding, and I always spritz with water in between grits. I'll start with 80, move up to 120, 220, and finish up with 320, and I'll wet the board down in between each grit to raise the grain, and this results in a super smooth board. So all was not lost. You can see here it's wet, and this also gives you a little preview of what it's going to look like once you oiled it. And so not bad. Cut the juice groove with the machine. There's some handles there, and then of course my brand in the back. And then I like to put little feet on them, just so that they're sitting up off the counter, even though I did put the handholds in there. So I'll measure carefully and pre-drill, and then I use these little rubber feet. And I think that just makes it that much nicer. After that, nice and flat. And here I love the way the grains turned out. I make sure to alternate so we don't have warping or cupping. And this is everybody's favorite part, putting the oil on. And you really get to see how beautiful the walnut is. I am a walnut addict. So we smear that in, front and back. You want to oil these things till they don't take any more oil. And then once the oil soaks in and is dried up, I will hit it with the board butter conditioner, and I make that myself. It's basically just yellow beeswax and mineral oil, heat it up into a mixture, and then I'll can it in a little tin, and usually just give one of those to anybody who buys a cutting board. And of course this is for family, so we hand delivered this. It was a good time, and I think they were pretty happy with it. It wasn't perfect, but after the catastrophe with the bent bit, it turned out pretty nice. And there's my board butter. And here's what it looked like all finished and conditioned. Really nice in my opinion. Hey, thanks for watching, guys. Stay tuned for more videos. We're going to be making a rolling cabinet for the shop. So, see you next time.